Another basketball video, how wholesome. I was wondering what to do for my next video that would be quick and easy to keep up the consistency of my uploads from my YouTube channel when I began researching more about Giannis Antetokounmpo, since he's always trending in basketball nowadays. And the further I researched into his draft, the more that my mind became shocked. So this is shock therapy. Jesus Christ! The 2013 NBA draft was an absolute mess! An absolute bonanza of failure of the finest quality. Not regarding how the talent panned out after the dust settled, however, because there are a considerable number of players who have developed into high-skilled athletes. The reason this particular draft was a gong show is because of how wide the span of the redraft order is. A lot of the players that ended up panning out to be near the top of their draft class in the end weren't even drafted in the top 10. So this draft is a double-edged sword. While some teams snagged absolute steals, there are a handful of prominent franchises that are reflecting back at this draft wondering where they bumped their head on the draft day. The 2013 NBA draft has become most notorious for the Shaq-sized bust Anthony Bennett that was selected with the first overall pick by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Bennett wasn't projected to go number 1 by most media outlets. He wasn't even a contender for the first overall selection. After 1 year of putting up above average numbers at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, he goes number 1.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Despite being a top player eligible for the draft, no one who still had all of their brain cells on draft day saw Bennett getting picked first. From the moment that the Cavs drafted him, skepticism began circulating throughout the media and analysts like a rumor that a high school cheer captain slept with the quarterback of the football team. Looking back and redrafting, there is no question whatsoever who would have been first overall. I previously mentioned Giannis, the Greek freak, and there is no question that he would have been the first overall selection in the redraft. Selected 15th overall by Milwaukee, the man is an absolute beast. His resume includes 2-time MVP, 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA selection, 4-time All-Defensive selection, and NBA Finals MVP. Not to mention the fact that he led the Bucks to their first championship in 50 years. His versatility is off the charts, and he may be one of the most well-rounded players in NBA history. The mere mention of the Milwaukee Bucks nowadays conjures Giannis' name 99 out of 100 times. After the Bennett bust, the Orlando Magic selected Victor Oladipo with the 2nd overall pick. At the time, it seemed to make much more sense for Oladipo to go 1st overall than Bennett, but Cleveland had already bluffed. Even in the redraft, it is not as much of a huge shock that Oladipo went 2nd overall. Although he would not be that high in the redraft, he would logically be within the top 5. Oladipo was a standout during his junior year with Indiana and ranked as one of the top prospects of the draft. In the pros, he became well noted for his all-around defensive play, athleticism, and his work ethic, whilst still being an offensive threat and putting up significant point totals. His stellar athleticism and all-around awareness has been overshadowed in his career by an vulnerability to injuries and bouncing around multiple teams in the league. But unlike Bennett, he's actually good. Looking back in redrafting, I'd put Rudy Gobert at the number 2 selection. He ended up going 27th overall to the Denver Nuggets, who, for some reason unbeknownst to man, traded him to the Utah Jazz for a random schmuck named Eric Green and financial considerations. Gobert emerged as one of the best defensive centers in NBA history, combined with being a 2-time All-Star, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 5-time All-Defensive First Team, and an absolute wall for the Jazz. Gobert has not only become an elite defensive threat, but the face of the Utah Jazz, as well as one of the main anchors of the team that have rose to becoming a significant threat to the league. Gobert has become notoriously lethal for the rest of the league, both on and off the court. As the coronavirus was in its early stages, Gobert touched everything he could frivolously as a way of mocking the virus' severity during a press conference. Well, he affirmed his Defensive Player of the Year award by stopping the entire league after it was confirmed that he had, in fact, caught the Rona. Karma at its absolute finest. He later apologized and reaffirmed his commitment to tackling the virus by donating $500,000 to assist people affected by the COVID pandemic. Regardless, he's still a prime defensive player and an absolute steal for the Utah Jazz. I still don't know what Denver was thinking when they traded away Gobert. At the 3rd selection in the 2013 NBA draft, the Washington Wizards selected Otto Porter Jr. from Georgetown. Porter was also considered to be one of the higher-ranking college prospects prior to the draft. He displayed pristine versatility and possessed more of an awareness mentality than an offensive mindset. His point totals, while not remarkably stellar, are still respectable considering that he has been through his fair share of injuries, and he isn't known specifically for his offense. He's one of those athletes who play the hidden game well, doing the things that don't necessarily show up on the score sheet best. Porter has almost always had a net plus for his professional career, and possesses the ability to guard multiple positions effectively. That being said, his potential is heavily dependent on his ability to stay healthy. At the time, Porter wouldn't have been a shock like Bennett being taken as high as he was. Looking back, he most likely would not be 3rd overall. I'd say just outside of the top 5. In his place for the redraft, CJ McCollum makes the most sense. He was drafted 10th overall by the Portland Trail Blazers, who snagged an absolute steal in him. Notorious for his lethal offensive prowess, McCollum has dazzled the league when it comes to finding ways to score, but what really makes him stand out is his offensive ball handling skills. They are so refined that he can just go about wherever he pleases to do so on the court with and without the ball. And he knows how to drive the net as well. He can play in multiple offensive areas as a result of his stellar offensive versatility, and has become one of the main anchors on the Trailblazers. The duo of Damian Lillard and McCollum is certainly a major force to be reckoned with, as they have become the franchise talent level two-headed monster for Portland. Despite consistent playoff appearances for the Trailblazers in the last few seasons, they have only reached the conference finals once in the last 10 seasons, which was in 2019 when they were swept by the dynasty team of the Golden State Warriors. However, in the midst of consistently coming up short, the Lillard-McCollum duel has been one of the biggest bright spots to this team. There were a handful of other notable talents that also panned out to become stars in the NBA, but they weren't top 10 selections originally. Steven Adams, for example, was drafted 12th overall by the Oklahoma City Thunder. The first ever New Zealand player to be taken in the first round, he is an absolute tank and a center that can literally give you the high ground in a game. He does have some consistency issues and has experienced some recent struggles, but he is still a formidable force to be reckoned with. Currently a member of Memphis, the Grizzlies as well as their fan base are hoping that he can overcome some of his struggles and return to being a defensive wall. He was heavily used during his time with the Thunder in grueling minutes, so that should be something that the Thunder must take into consideration if they are looking for him to be his most effective. Also notable was Robert Covington, but unlike Steven Adams or any of the other players mentioned, he wasn't even drafted. Playing college basketball at Tennessee State, he was not drafted during the draft days. Instead, he signed with the Rockets after joining them for the 2013 Summer League and later signed with the 76ers for a 4-year deal. After bouncing around teams for a few years, he ended up in Portland on the Trailblazers. His playing style is highly unique in that he can defend all 5 positions on the court and can also contribute offensively, coupled with shooting skills sprinkled with precision. He plays a hybrid game that leans more towards the defensive standpoint, but is still a positive asset to Portland. And a handful of other players who I'm just going to leave out because they aren't as notable as the ones I mentioned and because I easily get burned out with editing. And that basically sums up this video. The 2013 NBA draft was held in Brooklyn, New York at the Barclays Center and was an absolute cesspool of pristine trash, yielding one of the weakest talent hauls in NBA history. Aside from Giannis and Gobert, and possibly McCollum, there were very few athletes of note that developed into what was projected of them. Not discrediting Giannis and Gobert though, because they are phenomenal players and the cores of their respective franchises. But seriously, how does Cleveland botch the first overall pick so bad? Today, Anthony Bennett is considered to be one of the worst draft busts in the entire history of the NBA. Looking back, Cleveland could have had a franchise star like Giannis or Gobert, or take someone who is a more consensus prediction for the first overall selection like Victor Oladipo, but decided to draft for needs rather than the best player available. Well, they certainly aren't the only ones to fall into this trap. The Vancouver Canucks of the NHL joined the Cavaliers in the basement in 2016.